There's a specific wealth threshold where money stops being a factor in your daily decision making. In my experience, this number falls somewhere between $5 to $15 million. And once you cross this threshold, life can change fundamentally. But as with so many other things in life, while folks love to talk about their wins, they might not be so quick to speak about the challenges that come along with this level of wealth. So today, I'm going to show you exactly what I've seen changes at this level of wealth, in addition to the 5 things that ultra high net worth families that thrive at this threshold do differently. And lastly, I'm going to go over the one situation that I've seen cause major chaos over and over again for folks that have accumulated between $5 to $15 million. At this level, between $5 to $15 million in fully liquid investable assets, it's not always what you think it is. It can be better in some ways, it can be more complex in others, and it can be completely misunderstood by folks who have not achieved this level of wealth yet. And if you don't understand the transition that you're in, you could end up making decisions that could steal from the freedom and flexibility that you've worked so hard to earn. So let's break this down and start with the math, because the math matters. $5 million in liquid investable assets, conservatively managed at a 4% rate of withdrawal, gives you about $200,000 a year in sustainable spending power. $10 million gives you about $400,000 in spending power, and $15 million, upwards of $600,000 in sustainable spending power. Now, of course, taxes do come into play, and where you have those assets located, as far as non-retirement accounts, pre-tax, or Roth retirement accounts, can all be a factor in the situation. But regardless, these numbers are real and meaningful. For instance, if you've come from a middle class or upper middle class background, $200,000 in passive income could seem like a great life. If you're at $400,000 a year in income, that might seem like real wealth. And if you're at $600,000 or more in passive income per year, kudos to you. But here's what I've learned in working with these families for the better part of a decade. The math is the least interesting part of the conversation. Because what matters more than the numbers is this. First and foremost, you're probably not checking price tags when making purchases anymore. Not in a reckless way, not I'm buying a yacht on Tuesday type of way, but rather, I don't need to do mental math when I'm going about my daily life. It's more of a, I don't know what we spent on dining, leisure, or activities last month because I don't need to know type of way. Business class becomes the default, not because you're showing off, or not because you're reckless, because that upgrade just makes sense now. The math works out, the numbers align, it just works. Your friends mentioned a spontaneous trip to Aspen for the weekend. Game on. No checking accounts, no tough conversations with your spouse. You're just ready to rock and roll. Your daughter wants to start a business, and you need to give her a seed investment of $75,000 to get her going. You don't need to rejigger things. You don't need to be overly cautious. You could just make that commitment to help. This is the shift, and it can be profound. But under $5 million, you're probably constantly making trade-offs. Every decision you make comes with opportunity costs that can actually impact your overall financial health. If we do the home remodel, we have to forego our trip to Europe. If we help your brother, we have to skip out on the extra SUV purchase for the year. Everything below $5 million is either or. But once you reach that threshold between $5 to $15 million, the question then shifts from can I afford it to is it worth my time? So what does this level of wealth really feel like? Because I can give you numbers all day long. But you want to know what it's like to wake up in this reality. What's it like having this type of wealth versus chasing it? First up, location independence. And I'm not talking about working remotely. What I mean is, you're not doing the Austin versus San Francisco cost of living calculator online anymore. Because it's not relevant. It's not part of your decision-making process. Winters in San Diego, with the occasional trip to Aspen. Summers in Montauk, with the charter up to Rhode Island. It's doable. Your choices now are more based on what you want, as opposed to thinking solely about what you can afford. Second is generosity without sacrifice. Whether it be picking up the dinner tab without batting an eyelash, or helping a family member with a car repair or a home renovation. I've actually seen something quite common in these last few years, which I'd say is pretty impactful, and that is making contributions to philanthropy. $25,000 to the food bank, or $50,000 to your alma mater. It's not even a thought because it doesn't impact you. The third prong is experience abundance. You want to take your entire family on a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Italy? You pack them all up and go. Your son wants to get married in St. Thomas? You cover the flights, the villas, and you do it with a smile. 2-week safari in Tanzania? A buddy mentions it on Thursday, and you're booking it on Friday. This is a level where experiences become the default answer, not the maybe one day answer. And for many people who've worked their whole lives, who've deferred and saved and optimized, this is the dream, right? This is what you were building towards that whole time. The freedom and flexibility to say yes. But here's the reality check, because we don't want this to snowball into unrealistic expectations. At $5 to $15 million in liquid net worth, you're still doing the majority of your own tasks. You're dealing with home maintenance, you're calling the plumber, scheduling the HVAC person, or dealing with the electrician. You're booking your own travel, planning your own trips, and you're waiting on hold with the airline after they cancel your flight. Nothing happens automatically because you're still the project manager of your own life. Now, you might have a cleaning person a couple times a week. You might have your landscape maintenance taken care of regularly. And you might even have a part-time bookkeeper to manage the bills. But you're not handing your calendar off to somebody else. And you're not walking onto a plane that was scheduled and coordinated for you. Those things come with a different level, closer to 50, 75, or even 100 million. And I mention this because so often folks hit that $5 to $15 million level and they start to think, why am I doing all of this? Isn't the wealth to escape all of the headaches? And to be clear, at $5 to $15 million in liquid assets, you can still live an extraordinary life. But it's also a level where certain mistakes can become very, very expensive. Here's a pattern I've seen time and time again over the years. Somebody hits $15 million in assets. Maybe they sold a business. Maybe they had a great run as an executive at a company. Or maybe they invested and had a really terrific track record. What matters to them is life gets easier. The stress peels off. So they start upgrading. The flights shift from business class to first class. The hotels start at the Marriott, but then upgrade to the Four Seasons. They buy a third home, a lake house, and a ski house in Tahoe. And before they know it, they're spending over $600,000 annually, which felt quite similar to a pipe dream at $5 million in liquid assets, but now it feels like the norm. And here's the thing, at $15 million, many people probably could afford this lifestyle. The math checks out, the numbers work. But here's why it can be dangerous. These upgrades don't necessarily boost up your level of happiness proportionately. The jump from economy to business class, that could be meaningful. Your back doesn't hurt, you're able to sleep, and when you arrive, you're ready to enjoy the trip or get down to business, which can be very positively impactful. That jump from business class to first class, it's something you might notice on the first trip, or maybe the next 2 or 3. But then, it just kind of becomes normal. The jump from a nice hotel to a luxurious hotel might be nice for the first few days, and then it's just where you stay. That third home, it's amazing for the first season. You're there every weekend making memories. Year 2, maybe you're there half as much, and now you have a project to manage, whether it's maintenance, additional taxes, or just headaches that come along with home ownership. Because here's what many neglect to talk about when it comes to lifestyle creep. The jump from nothing to something can be extraordinary, but the jump from something to something better doesn't always move the needle more. Spending $400,000 a year can actually feel similar to spending $200,000 a year after about 18 months. You adapt to the new life, the luxury becomes baseline, and everything is now the new norm. The difference being, now you need an additional few $1 million to continue to sustain this lifestyle. And if the markets drop 30%, you panic and become super fearful. Not because you're going broke, you're not, but because you've calibrated your lifestyle to peak wealth. And that peace of mind that wealth is supposed to create, it can evaporate quite quickly. I've actually seen multiple families become crippled both mentally and emotionally. So here's the question that matters most at this level. Not, can I afford this? Because chances are you probably can. But rather, does this make my life better? Or am I just filling space? Because that's what tends to happen. You have the capacity to upgrade everything, so you do. But upgrading doesn't necessarily mean improving. Sometimes that third home is just complexity disguised as luxury. More keys, more bills, more taxes, more tasks. Sometimes The Ferrari is fun for about 6 months. Then, it's just a car that you have to park. Sometimes, the membership to the golf club that you barely use is just a subscription that you resent paying. And this is where intentionality becomes everything. So what do the families that thrive at this level of wealth do differently? And there's a clear pattern between the ones who actually feel wealthy and the ones who just look wealthy on paper. The ones who wake up grateful versus the ones who wake up anxious. First, they set lifestyle spending caps, not just simply spend whatever we want. They sit down with maybe their spouse or their advisor and they figure out a number. Maybe that number is $350,000 a year, or $500,000 a year, or even $250,000 a year. The number is irrelevant. The important part is that they have a number. And when they hit that number, they stop. Extra investment returns, they let them continue to compound. Or they gift them to their children. Or they give to charity. They don't spend more. And the reason being here is because they've defined enough. And once they reach enough, they stop themselves from falling into an endless upgrade cycle. You stop asking, what else could we have? And start asking, what do we really need? And once you make that shift, your mind starts working differently. Second, they avoid comparison. And this can actually be harder than it sounds. Because at this level, you could find yourself in the same company as folks with 50 million or 100 million. Maybe your child goes to school with the kids of a tech founder who exited for 9 figures. Or you're at the same country club as a famous hedge fund manager, or your neighbor just bought their 4th exotic car. And keeping up can not only be expensive, it can be endless. There's always someone with more, there's always another upgrade, and there's always someone at another level. The families that tend to thrive in this category, they make the conscious decision to opt out of the rat race. They stop caring what their neighbors are doing, and they define success on their own terms. Third, they focus on experiences over stuff. That third home I mentioned earlier, many end up admitting that it can bring more complexity than joy. Buying high-end collectibles and justifying them as investments because it's fun to talk about at a dinner party or flash in front of your friends whenever convenient. However, I'd argue that the complexity coming with illiquid investments or joys, the potential tax consequences, and valuation nightmares are more of a headache than anything else. Experiences, on the other hand, have the potential to compound forever. The month you spent in Europe with your adult children before they had kids of their own, or the annual trip with college friends, or even the tradition where you started taking your entire extended family somewhere warm for the holiday season. These are all examples of investment in connection, not material accumulation. And here's what's beautiful about experiences. More than likely, they don't come with carrying costs, like insurance and maintenance. Fourth, and this one is super important to me, they protect simplicity, because complexity is the hidden cost at this level. You can afford to add things, so you do. More properties, more accounts, more investments, more advisors, more decisions. And suddenly, life feels heavy because you're managing too much. Protecting simplicity involves saying no to things that complicate life without improving it. These folks that thrive, they consolidate, they streamline, and they make their lives simple. Fifth, they build in accountability. That lifestyle spending cap I mentioned earlier, they track it. Not aggressively or obsessively, but they know what it is and they know where they're at. They have a quarterly check-in. Are we staying in line or are we drifting off? Because drift is exactly how this happens. You don't just wake up one day and start simply spending double. It happens a little here, a little there, and next thing you know, you're off track. But the families that thrive, they understand this and they protect against it. Now the question that remains here, what type of life are you going to create with this freedom? Are you going to wake up grateful or anxious? Are you going to feel abundant or exposed? Are you going to live or are you going to chase? Because that tends to be the game at this level. And the families that win it aren't necessarily the ones with the most. They're the ones that have defined enough. And they've built a life that they love inside of that boundary. And if you're stuck trying to figure out what enough is for you, check out our next video here.